Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Whether this is your first time tuning in or you've been with me for a while, your support means the world. By sharing the podcast, leaving reviews, or just listening week after week, you're helping to create a thriving community for stroke survivors and caregivers, a space where we can all feel seen, heard, and supported. Since 2015, I've been dedicated to bringing you free, valuable resources through this podcast, and your support makes it possible. If you found value in these episodes, I'd love for you to consider supporting the show on Patreon at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Your contribution helps keep this podcast alive and accessible for stroke survivors around the world. I'd also like to take a moment to remind you about my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. It has been a guide and a source of hope for many stroke survivors and their loved ones, offering practical insights and inspiration for navigating recovery. If you haven't checked it out yet, you can find it on Amazon or at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. So, what did we speak about in today's episode? Well, Jonathan and Brittany joined me to share their extraordinary journey of resilience, recovery, and transformation after Jonathan survived a hemorrhagic stroke caused by anabolic steroid overuse. Jonathan opens up about the day his life changed forever, from the subtle signs Brittany noticed to his grim diagnosis at the hospital. We explore the impact of anabolic steroids on his health and how they led to dangerously high blood pressure and the devastating brain bleed that followed. Jonathan also reflects on his emotional recovery, battling anxiety and depression, and the lessons he learned about prioritizing health over aesthetics. Brittany offers powerful insights into her role as caregiver, from navigating the challenges of supporting Jonathan through recovery to balancing the needs of their 6 children. Together, they share how humor, family support, and resilience help them find light in the darkest moments. This conversation also dives into Jonathan's mission to raise awareness about the dangers of steroid overuse and inspire others to make healthier choices. If you're a stroke survivor, caregiver, or someone interested in the intersection of fitness and health, this episode will leave you inspired and motivated. Let's dive in. Jonathan and Brittany Carmel, welcome to the podcast.
Yep, thank you. Glad to be here.
Take two, guys. We tried this last week, didn't work. I'm glad to have you back here today. Jonathan, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
Yeah, man. So, what happened to me was August 20th, 2024, about roughly 15, almost 16 weeks ago. I got up about 4 a.m. like I normally do. I normally get up, have some coffee, scroll through my phone. Then I crawl back into bed with my wife, Brittany. We snuggle until about 5 a.m. And then she gets up and normally gets in the shower. I typically head to the gym. That's our morning routine every day of the week. This particular morning, she went to the bathroom. Before she got in the shower, she looked in the bedroom and saw that I had not gotten up yet. So she kind of come over to me and said, "Hey, you're not going to the gym? Hey." And I started mumbling really funny, really weird. And I tried to get up, but I couldn't quite get up. So she helped me up, but I was stumbling, really couldn't walk, didn't have any balance. She knew something was wrong right then. She took me in the living room, sat me down. She got the kids ready, got them off to school, and I still was acting funny, still couldn't walk. So she rushed me to the ER. After getting to the ER, the doctor there immediately said, "I think he's having a stroke. I need to do a CAT scan." So they scanned my brain. It immediately came out and told Brittany, "It's not looking good. He looks like his brain is bleeding pretty bad. We're going to have to transport him up an hour north to the Chattanooga CHI Memorial Hospital. That's where they have a good neurological team, and they can try to save his life." So they transported me up there. From there, I don't remember anything. I really don't remember anything of that morning. They transported me up to CHI Hospital in Chattanooga. Um, for three full days, I was unconscious. On the fourth day, I regained consciousness, but barely. But the doctor was in the hospital room, and he told me that I was a miracle. 77% of people with the left thalamus brain bleed, like I had lost so much blood, die. They basically pass away. The other 23% are severely disabled. I'm lucky that I'm alive, and I'm going to have a tough road to recovery. At that time, he was telling me that I could not walk. I had no movement or function out of my right arm. My face was fine. I looked normal in my face. I just was very tired, unconscious. My speech was slurring still, and I could not walk, and I could not really use my right arm. And that's when my wife came up to get me now, and we went home. They tried to get me to stay at the hospital for recovery, but the hospital being an hour away and us having 6 children in school, I couldn't stay up there, and because she wouldn't be able to stay with me. So we decided I have a gym here at home, and I decided to do recovery and therapy on my own here at home. So that's kind of the story how the stroke happened and how we got here.
Far out. Brittany, in the morning at 5 o'clock, it's pretty normal for somebody not to want to get out of bed. What what was it for you that made you go back and check up on him and make sure he was okay? Because nobody I know wants to get out of bed at 5 in the morning.
Well, he has like a military routine, so him not being at the gym is like it don't happen. Yeah, I just knew like was wrong, you know.
Mm.
And then he started mumbling. I'm like, it was very weird. And you don't think, oh well, he's having a stroke. It's not like, oh, the right side of my face is paralyzed or anything like that. Like you kind of have a little knowledge on people who have strokes, and it wasn't just like all one right side. It's like you couldn't walk at all, and it's just so I didn't know what to think, to be honest with you. Didn't
Seemed
know what
more
was happening.
it seemed more dramatic than something that you could kind of
Mhm.
let him take a rest about or
Oh yeah, no, something was definitely wrong. I mean, he rarely even gets sick, so it's you know.
What was so devastating was when the doctor told her that um, she needs to get prepared for the worst because most people don't come out of this. That was the most devastating part because upon getting to the ER, she just thought I was having an allergic reaction or something. She had no clue that it was a stroke, more or less a brain bleed so bad.
Mm.
yeah. What's it like, Brittany? Like you've never heard that before said about your husband. These doctors,
Mm-hmm.
are they being are they giving you any hope? Are they saying there's a small chance, anything, or are they just telling you worst case scenario?
I guess it was more just like worst case scenario. Like I said, the hospital here is not equipped at
Mm.
all. So they're just like telling you and things like, oh, well, we got to hurry up and transport him as quickly as possible. And, not getting to talk to the doctor right away in the Chattanooga hospital and then finally talking to him. And he's like, well, there's so much pressure on the brain. And, it's one of those things where they can't just say, oh, yeah, he'll be fine or anything like that because he's so bad off. Yeah,
And they
it
really
was
don't know.
rough.
They really don't know.
Yeah, pretty much.
At
They're
that
just,
time, they're hoping for the
yeah,
best.
they're pretty much, you just have to monitor him and, do another CT scan and then do an MRI and see if there's, like if the bleeding has stopped, but we can't do that for such and such amount of hours. And so it's like you just have to wait and just like live in fear and pray and so.
Hmm. What about the children at that time? How do you tell them what's happening? What did you go through there?
Mm-hmm.
let's take a quick pause here to reflect on Jonathan and Brittany's remarkable story so far. Their journey shows the resilience it takes to face life after a stroke, the power of family support, and the courage to overcome immense challenges. If this podcast has brought value to your recovery or inspired you in any way, I'd love your support on Patreon at patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Becoming a Patreon not only helps sustain the podcast, but also allows you to be a part of a community dedicated to growth and healing. If you're looking for additional resources, remember to check out my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. It has been described as super helpful, and one reader said, Bill comes off so positive. His book and podcast will leave you hooked. Whether you're just starting your recovery or further along, the book is available on Amazon and at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. Now, let's get back to Jonathan and Brittany's story and hear more about how they're navigating recovery with strength and determination.
Well, when they came home from school, I told my boys that I didn't really explain to them the whole stroke thing because I felt like they would not quite get it. I just had to kind of like, he's in the hospital, and just lightly say, everything's going to be okay. I can't just go and tell them, well, I don't know what's going to happen, And then I told my girls, since they're older, what had happened and trying to explain to them to see if they were even knowledgeable at, some circumstance they've heard, what a stroke is, but not knowing the details of, we don't know what's going to happen.
And again, we have 6 kids. We have our 3 girls are oldest, but one's almost 15, one's 13, and one's 11. Our boys, we have twin boys. They're 9 years old, and we have a little boy who's 6.
And the 15-year-old's very capable of kind of taking over the family for a small amount of time, getting the kids organized and getting everyone. Okay, that's really good. So then you're in hospital, and this is all surreal to me because this short amount of time for you to be on the podcast since your injury and your scare and all that kind of stuff is unheard of. And to be speaking to me the way that you're speaking to me in the capacity that you have is really fabulous. Let me just make sure that what I'm trying to do is like express how profoundly joyful it is to see somebody who's been through what you've been through to be on my podcast already, and in your condition. So tell me about, first, we're at that stage of so much pressure. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if he's going to get through it. And then how many days to get to the other side where, actually, I think he's going to be okay? How many days did it take to get to there?
It was, I think, on day 4, I just all of a sudden woke up. I hadn't been conscious the whole time, but on day 4, I woke up. The doctor happened to be in my room. He was the only one there, and a nurse. And he looked at me and said, welcome back, son. He was an older gentleman. And he looked at me and said, you're a miracle, because we weren't sure if we were going to get you back. And that's when he told me the statistics. 77% of people pass away. The other 23% normally either never walk again or they're severely disabled. And at the time, that scared me. But I was able to talk a little bit. I was able to understand, but still really fuzzy. But he told me, he said, the bleeding has stopped. The pressure's going down. We're going to keep you here for a couple of weeks for rehab. And that's when I called my wife. She came up there, and we basically told him we can't stay. I'll go home and do rehab. Just need the rest. And that's when we went home. And being home, the story is even more amazing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. But what deficits were you left with? What did you have to deal with to recover from?
I couldn't really walk. I had to use a wheelchair at first. My legs just would not really move. Now, I could stand up, but they were weak, taking steps really hard. My right arm really didn't have any strength. I could move it, but it didn't have any strength, any grip strength. My left arm seemed like nothing had happened. And then, of course, my eyesight was a little messed up. Things were blurry. I felt lightheaded, and my speech was really, really slurred.
Okay. And you discharged yourself from hospital because it was too far, and you came home with all of those conditions.
Yes, sir.
Brittany, what was it like having that guy, this version of your guy back home?
It definitely was different, but I mean, we made it through. I told him, granted, I had to keep reminding him like every 5 minutes because he would forget stuff and I'd have to repeat it. That it's going to be all right. I'm going to take care of you no matter what. I pushed him around the wheelchair until he moved to the walker. I helped him with everything.
Bill, I don't want to make a joke of this, but we had some hilarious times too. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, 50 First Dates.
Mm-hmm.
It's with Drew Barrymore. Well, in that movie, there's a guy that had a traumatic brain injury, and every 10 seconds he would lose his memory and forget. And so I would walk around and say, "Hi, I'm Tom," and then 10 seconds later I'd say, "Hi, I'm Tom." So we had a little fun with it too.
Sounds like you had some fun with it. Brittany would have been thinking, oh my gosh, has he actually forgotten who he is? Does he think he's Tom?
Yeah.
I know that movie. It's good to observe and sort of to turn things into, to kind of create a little bit of light laughter about the situation because it's pretty serious. And if you're going to be serious the whole time, it's going to be really stressful. I know there's some stroke survivors who don't believe there's anything funny about stroke, but man, I reckon there's tons of stuff funny about stroke. I had some moments where I was in the most sort of serious state before my surgery in 2014, and I was in the hospital getting prepared for surgery, and they do all the pre-tests and all that kind of stuff. And my bleed had settled down just enough so that I could get to surgery. They checked us out. And then when I was doing that final examination and they sent me home, it was probably about 3 hours worth of tests, all different tests to know what they're dealing with for surgery. When they sent me home, I started having a dizzy spell and I started noticing all this weird stuff happening. Like I was out of my head, out of my brain. I don't know what it was. It was like really surreal kind of experience. And we go and I go back from, I leave the area where I was getting all the tests done, different part of the hospital, and I go to emergency and I say, I was here for tests for surgery in a week, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm having an episode. I think this thing might be bleeding again because it had bled 3 times and I'm not feeling well. And they initially said, okay, well, you look all right. Can you go and sit down on the chair just in emergency with your wife, and then we'll get somebody out to come and help you? I said, oh, fine. I went and sat down. And then there was this kid sitting next to me. He must have been on the autistic spectrum or something, right? And he was sitting next to me, and I was holding onto the armrests of the chair, and he was too. And every once in a while, he kind of rubbed his hand on my hand, not accidentally kind of thing. We just touched hands. And then a little while later, I heard his mum say something to the tune of, "You were in the toilet, yeah?" And he goes, "Yes." And then she said to him, "Did you wash your hands?" And in that moment, all of my stroke symptoms went away. And the only thing I could think of was, I have got to get up and go and wash my hands. And I said to my wife, you need to sit here, wait for me. I'm going to go to the toilet and wash my hands. And all the stroke symptoms, all the stuff that I was experiencing, all the blurriness and all that just immediately vanished. I went to the toilet, I washed my hands, and I came and sat down, and then I just kept my hands on my lap so we wouldn't interact in that way with this young kid again. So like I feel like if you look for it, there are moments where you can make light of the situation because I think it's really helpful. So now this stroke story is going to take a little bit of a turn because we know what happened to you, we know how you got home, we know what you're like now, but why did this happen? That's the big question here because it's a very different why to why most other people have stroke. So you hear about stroke stats are that about 80, depending on who you hear it from, 80 to 90% of strokes are preventable. And that is a really staggering number, which means that of the millions of people who have strokes, most of the strokes are unnecessary. It's lifestyle factors that causes it, right? And you hear about the regular lifestyle factors: smoking, drinking excessively, being overweight, not checking blood pressure, diabetes, you name it. We've heard them all. We know the ones that they are, but your situation was different. So tell me
Yeah.
about what caused your stroke.
Well, really quickly, I want to give it some context. It, started when I was younger. I was a chubby, little fat kid. I grew up with body dysmorphia, if you know what that is. And so as I got older, right around 40 years old, I had a friend that lived in Arizona, and he turned me on to steroids. So I started doing steroids about 6 or 7 years ago. I started off with mild steroids like testosterone and some SARMs, selective androgen receptor modules, very mild stuff. But and they did good building muscle, but they didn't give me that lean, cut up look that I wanted. I wanted to be super muscular. I wanted to look like Superman. So the past like 3 years, I started trying harder steroids and multiple steroids and stacking steroids. They call it stacking when you use multiple compounds. Testosterone has base, but I started using things like Winstraw that helps dry you up, make you look dry and cut. I started using things like Trenbolone, which builds muscle, builds strength, but also makes you look extremely muscular. Every piece of food you put in you, I don't care if it's a donut, it's going to your muscle cells. It's making you muscular. The thing about these steroids are you still got to put in the work. You still got to lift the weights. You just heal, and it happens a lot faster when you got them. You still got to eat enough protein and work out. So what I had done is I made the big mistake of I did a cycle about a year ago, a little over a year ago, of Trenbolone and Anavar and Winstraw with the testosterone, and I never came off. You're supposed to cycle it 12 weeks and then take 12 weeks off. If I would have done that, I probably would have been okay. But this time I cycled on and never came off. I started to look so good, so muscular, so cut up that I just couldn't imagine coming off of it in my body. Because when you do come off, you do fluff up. I call it fluff up a little bit, gain a little bit of body fat, but you don't lose a lot. But I didn't want that anymore. I stayed on it, and that's what led to blood pressure shooting up sky high. I ignored it, and it kept shooting up. Just 2 or 3 weeks before this happened, Bill, he had me in the ER because my blood pressure was too high. And they gave me medicine, got my blood pressure down. I went on home, and I still injected the steroids the next day. And so I asked for this. It was my fault. But yeah, the steroids took me out. They caused that artery to rupture in my vein. Too high blood pressure.
Yeah. Okay. So, Brittany, what's it like experiencing that, knowing that this was preventable, that it should never have happened, and then, and then watching it happen? Now, I understand that there's some other stuff going on. This relationship is, full of many different experiences and things and wife issues and husband issues and kid issues. Like I totally get that. And I don't want to cause, create any kind of conversation that is uncomfortable for you guys. But I am curious, since on the podcast, you're all willingly here. What's it like being the wife of a person who, A, has body dysmorphia? Let's acknowledge that, and then B, also takes this path to try and improve his physique, I suppose.
I don't know. I have a little bit of body dysmorphia, but I would never touch anything.
Uh-huh.
But I would say that I was definitely not knowledgeable about steroids. I've never researched anything, looked into anything. It's not something that, like, you hear some people take steroids and they're just mean, and
Mm.
it was nothing like that. So I'm like, well, but having high blood pressure and ignoring it.
Yeah. The real only side effect I got from the steroids were high blood pressure. I never got mean. I never got angry. I never got violent, destructive. It didn't do those things to me like you hear sometimes.
Mm.
It made me pretty normal. Now, it did raise my libido through the roof, which, that's one of the side effects. And it generally made me pretty calm. It wasn't bad like that.
When it raises the libido, you don't necessarily see that as a negative either.
No, but it can be negative.
It
Like
can be.
yeah, trenbolone raises your libido to where you can't stop thinking about it. So
Uh,
10, 15 times a day. Yeah.
okay, so it impacts the way you think, not only the way your body
Oh, yeah.
feels, but also the way you think about it.
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. And when and that was really interesting what Brittany said. Like, you didn't know much about steroids, and the only thing we generally hear about is, they've got roid rage. We hear that every so often, and that's about the only thing I know
Yeah.
about steroids. And you didn't see any real major changes, and you thought, "Mm,
No,
seems to be going okay for him.
I
He's
just
getting
thought
the
it was.
result."
Mhm.
Yeah, he's getting a
Yeah, it was
result.
like I was result driven. I got the results quickly. She saw that. She saw how happy it made me, and
Mm,
I didn't let her know all the dangers. I just told her, "Hey, this is something I'm taking. Don't worry about it. It'll be
Yeah.
okay." And then, I just kept on going.
mm-hmm,
Mhm.
mm-hmm. And when you look back now, did it actually make you happy, or was it not real happiness? It was just like a smoke screen of what you thought happiness, where you thought happiness came from.
That's right. It was more like a smoke screen. It was something I'd wanted my whole life, so I'd started to obtain it. And so that did make me happy, but it was more of a smoke screen because I knew that once I stopped taking it, I was going to lose some of what I gained.
Uh-huh. That's the hook. That's the whole thing.
Yep.
Uh, how often were you training?
Every day, 6, sometimes 7 days a week,
Uh-huh. Hence why
and
Brittany
more
knew something
multiple
was
hours
wrong.
a day.
How
Yep.
many?
Sometimes multiple hours a day.
Uh-huh. And how much are you eating?
Man, probably anywhere from 8 to 10,000 calories a day when I was in my bulking phase to put on size. But I'd cut it back to about 3,000 when I was trying to lean up and cut up.
Uh-huh. And the bulking time, is that part of that cycle where uh, you are trying to put muscle on so that
Yep.
the muscle gets larger, and then the cutting time is it is it time where you're going and doing any kind of shows, or is it just summer? When is it? When do you kind of go into the cutting phase?
So bulking is just like you said, you're trying to put on more muscle mass. But when you put on muscle mass, you have to eat a lot more. So you are going to get a little bit fluffy, put on a little bit of body fat. The cutting phase is more trying to get that dry look, lose all the water you're retaining, lose all the body fat you're retaining, just kind of look like a Greek god. You're chiseled everywhere.
Yeah, that's such a fake thing. That's such a temporary time, isn't it, to be like that? How long
Yes.
can you sustain looking like that?
Well, if you're taking the drugs, you can sustain for
Oh,
good if you're on them. But if you're off, you'll lose most of that muscle mass, and you'll definitely start to lose that dry look probably within the month.
Uh-huh. So when you're looking great, you're looking in the mirror, you're loving it. When you're bulking up, are you okay with the way that you look when you're bulking up, or are you totally hating it?
I'm okay with it, not totally happy with it, but okay, because I know that I'm gonna put on size that I'm gonna rip up and I'm gonna look bigger and more cut. Now, one of the other things that you get is a lot of strength. You're talking about average guy, 5'8". I weigh 185 pounds now. When I'm doing those steroids, I'm benching 500 pounds. I can't do that now. I'm not on anything now, so I can't do that now.
Wow. So what about wear and tear joints on your joints and all that? Because of the steroids, are they healing quicker? There isn't so much wear and tear. What happens there?
When you're on the steroids, you don't feel any pain. It's like it's not there, non-existent. But now that I'm off of the steroids, I have shoulder pain. I have joint pain. Yeah, it's pretty common.
Uh-huh. Okay. So, Brittany, you're with a guy who, for whatever reason, we'll try and see if we can unpack the reason in a little bit. For whatever reason, looks after his body and looks great.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen him in the time that you've known him, the time that he's been a dad and all that kind of stuff, to not look great, to think, oh, this guy doesn't look good?
I think he's always looked great.
Yeah.
But at one time
Yeah.
I was pretty fluffy. So
Mhm.
Compared to
yeah.
who? Like who in your eyes or like in
Well, yes, in her eyes too. She knew I was chubby. So we've been together 16 years. I'd say the first 8 to 10 years, I was a little fluffy. I was a little overweight, and
uh
uh,
but
and she still loved me.
yeah, that's what I'm getting at, right? Didn't seem to be an issue. But for you, was it always an underlying issue?
Yes, yes,
Okay, righto. So I'm just trying to get the psychology of the whole thing, the thing that makes you make a decision. It's like a drug. It is a drug. I know
yeah,
steroids are, but we're talking about the drug of the look, not the steroid per se, the
yeah.
look and how you want to perceive yourself or other people to perceive. Is it about other people, how they perceive you, or is it about you?
All, all. I want other people to look at me and say, "Wow, look at that guy," and I also want to think of that myself. But like I said, all this comes from body dysmorphia,
Yeah.
and there's a long history of it in my life. I was raised up with no father. My mother was a heroin addict. My mother died of a heroin overdose when I was 14. I found her dead. My entire life, I never had anybody telling me they loved me, no parents to raise me. I had a deep, deep, and dark childhood. And so
Mhm.
that helped create the body dysmorphia. I needed people to love me. I needed them to love what they saw. That would help me love what I saw. And that was the reason for the body dysmorphia.
Brittany, is this the same guy that you knew just a few weeks ago, talking this wisdom literally a few weeks ago? Was it any of
No,
that kind of stuff from coming then?
mm-mm.
Yeah. He's changed heaps. It sounds like the old you wasn't considering any of these things. It sounds like you've changed heaps in that time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Is that right,
absolutely.
Brittany?
Yeah, different mindset.
Yeah. That's a great turnaround. I mean, I'm trying to emphasize that for the purpose of how quickly things can change, how quickly your mind
Yeah.
can kind of fall into line and um, give you information and wisdom that you didn't have before. So
Yeah.
how do you see yourself different? How have you sort of noticed that transition?
Well, one thing is doing the steroids. Most of what I gained from doing the steroids has not gone away. I'm still in good shape, just not as muscular, not as strong. Um, but the perspective I've gained is I'm almost 50 years old. I got a loving wife. I've been with her for so long. and I have 6 children with her, and I'm all they got. And I have to provide for them and take care of them. And the thought of not being here and them struggling without me scares me. And so I've made it a mission of mine to stay healthy, to eat right, to not do any nicotine. I've even cut back where I don't even drink caffeinated coffee. I drink decaf. I'm going to change this. I feel like this is the second half of my life, and now's the time to do it right.
Yeah. With all the dramas of your life, being a young kid of 14, discovering what you discovered, being without your dad, did you have any support during that time from any other extended family, from counseling services? Did you have any support whatsoever?
No, my mother sent me to counseling services to get medication that I was supposed to take for issues I had as a child, but the medication was not for me. My mother would take them and sell them and then shoot them up, do dope with them. So I didn't really have a support system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So has it been, what's life like been after you became an adult? Have you been able to transition into work properly at the beginning of this, sort of after you're 18 and all that kind of stuff? How did you kind of move out of that teenage phase where you're meant to be unruly, crazy, not listening to anyone when you have your parents around, but you had to do it without your
Mm-hmm.
parents? So what was that transition like for you into
Well,
adulthood?
I'll let you know a little secret. I don't tell many people, but since we're here, I'll tell you. It was a hard road. At 17 years old, when my mother died, I found out that somebody shot her up with too much dope and robbed her. Well, I ran into that person when I was 17 years old, and I almost killed him. I went to prison for 10 years. I didn't get out till I was 26 years old, and that's when I made the transition. I told myself I'm too young for this. I can't be a criminal. I don't want to go down the same path my mother went down, and I turned my life around. I started studying information technology, studying computers, and then I got my first job doing help desk, and I worked my way up to now I work for a software company, and I'm a senior director of digital transformation now. So it was a long, hard road. I had to start from the bottom, but everything about me was about, hey, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm going to prove them I am supposed to be here. And I met my wife early in that journey, and she supported everything I did. We had to move. We've moved from Virginia to California to New York to Texas to Florida twice. I mean, we've moved around a lot, and she's been pregnant most of that time, but she still supported me because I could not stay in the environment that I grew up in. I had to get away and start over new.
Yeah. Man, that is intense. You to be commended. It sounds like though your dramatic moments in your life are really important for you to turn the next page and create this next chapter, different version of
Yep.
yourself. And you seem to really learn from your mistakes based on what you've already described about what happened to you only a few months ago and also many years ago. So, Brittany, from your perspective, where are things at now? What are the things that you need to pay attention to and support for? Like, what's left with regards to the stroke that needs the continued support?
Just life.
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple. I make a joke of the stroke and the recovery, but early on, it's been almost 16 weeks. So when I say early on, it was more like I was 4 weeks after the stroke. I started to experience a lot of anxiety, and a lot of depression came with it too. And I'd never had anxiety or depression ever in my life, really, that I can remember. But all of a sudden, I started worrying about everything, what I'm eating, am I going to have another stroke? So much worry. And that turned to depression. Some days I'd wake up and I'd feel like in total despair. Like, what is there left to live for? And this beautiful woman right here pulled me out of it every single time. She made sure that I knew, hey, you're loved. You can't go anywhere. You're going to be okay. And that was the most important thing I needed then. I don't have any real anxiety anymore, or depression, but that was one of the toughest things I experienced since recovering from this stroke.
Wow. So I am honestly, like, I'm in a bit of a situation where I've never been before. Things seem to have progressed really well, very short amount of time. What are the doctors saying about this blood vessel now, about the bleed, about your blood pressure? Where is all of that?
Well, from what the doctor said, they did more CAT scans. They've done more checks since the stroke, and they said everything looks good. There's no blockages. There's no plaque buildup, because I've been paying a lot of attention to cholesterol, and I've gotten scanned from head to toe, just looking, are there any plaque buildup, anything, narrow blood vessels, and nothing. Everything looks good. So everything in my brain looks good. Everything through my body. The blood pressure was running really high at first. It's now stabilized. Not because of lifestyle. I'm eating right, drinking right, doing all the right things. It was mainly because I was anxious. I had a lot of anxiety. And so that was shooting my blood pressure up. Now I'm on blood pressure medicine, but it's stabilized now. I don't have as much anxiety or anything like that. So right now, I feel like I'm as healthy as I've ever been.
Yeah.
And that lessened anxiety came with more recovery. It's like, oh, today I wake up and I feel clear, and my sight is good. The lights aren't bothering me. It's like that progression, like, oh, I am getting better. I'm not going to have another stroke. And, and then it's like.
And she's there to reassure
getting
me.
better and better every day.
Yeah. So as things improve, as the risk perhaps decreases, as everything starts to stabilize, then the mind can be eased, and then with a little bit of support and a little bit of encouragement, then those thoughts can go away. Then that makes sense that anxiety is kind of around when you're unwell. It completely makes sense that it's part of that illness. And many stroke survivors comment about exactly the same thing. Will I have another stroke? And kind of put themselves in a situation where they're overthinking all the things, which is very normal. And that's good. That means that you're able to be around for your family and for your wife and for everybody that needs you and loves you. And where are you at with the body dysmorphia part of the whole journey? How do you think about that now?
I honestly do not even think about it. The thing is, Bill, I started going back to the gym, and I have a gym at home, and now I've gotten my weight back up to around 185. I'm still about 20, 25 pounds lighter, but as I look in the mirror and I'm lifting weights, the same veins still pop out, the same muscle, and I'm like, wow, I still got it. I don't need body dysmorphia. I look good, and I'm no drugs, no stimulants, no anything. I'm just going to do it all natural.
Well, that's it. Perfectly. That's good. That keeps you healthy. That keeps your muscle mass. That keeps you strong. That does all the amazing things that being physically active always did,
And know what else?
Yeah.
I want to talk to people. I've decided that I want to get out there and start to speak, to tell people what happened to me, the dangers of using steroids, the dangers of using some of these supplements. Let them know my story and what I went through, and hopefully help somebody else one day.
I think that's really important. A lot of stroke survivors do that. They want to reach out and make sure people know about the risks of whatever it was that they were doing that caused their preventable stroke, for example. I've interviewed a couple of guys who've had damage to their carotid artery as a result. I think it was the carotid artery as a result of jiu-jitsu choking. So they're in
Ooh.
jujitsu, they're training, they're practicing, and they're competing. So in the competitions, um, either the opponent is trying to choke them out because it's a quick way to get a tap out, um, or in training, they're they're practicing choking people out. I mean, I can't think of anything more stupid, to be honest, than practicing
Yeah.
to choke people out. Now, a couple of the guys that I interviewed had some damage to the back of their necks, and as a result of that, they had a stroke. And as a result of that, they went through a lot of the dramas that we've already spoken about on this podcast episode and many others before this. And they wanted to reach out and make sure that they told people of the dangers of jiu-jitsu, that part of it specifically, where there's a lot of blunt force trauma, there's impact to the arteries, and people don't realize how sensitive they are. And what they were experiencing was dissections. So the inside of the artery was just tearing off a little bit, and it was creating a little flap. Now, there's nothing wrong with the artery. It's not going to break and bleed or anything like that further. But that little tear inside that creates the flap inside the blood vessel changes the blood flow and causes clots. That's the only thing it does. Sometimes it heals by itself. It goes back and it goes back to position. Other times it needs to be clipped. But the guys reached out and said, we need to tell people about this thing because nobody talks about the injuries that are
Wow.
associated to the brain after jujitsu. So that's common. And I really like the fact that you reached out for that reason and also prepared to tell me about things that a lot of people wouldn't be prepared to tell somebody on a
Yeah.
podcast that goes worldwide. Now,
Yeah.
with regards to the steroids, are there any withdrawal symptoms? Do you notice anything other than how much you can lift, etc.? Do you notice the body kind of needing to reset?
The body kind of reset at first. My strength went down really low. I wasn't sure if it was due to the stroke or was it just because I came off the steroids, but my strength went really low. So I've had to reset and build that back up. Now comes back pretty quick. It's called muscle memory. Um, it came back pretty quick. I'm still not as strong. I probably will never be as strong as I used to be because I'm going to be clean now. But there is a part two coming off steroids that's mental as well. Um, before, prior to the stroke, and I was on the heavy steroids every day and working out every day, and my wife can attest to this. I lived and breathed bodybuilding. I lived and breathed lifting weights. I looked in the mirror constantly. It's all I thought about. It's all I did. And man, that part of my life's gone now. It's different. So there was a tad bit of depression at first, not doing that anymore, not having anything. Like my goal was to be super strong, super big, super muscular. Now that's not my goal anymore. So I had to refine myself. I had to find new goals, new hopes, new things to do with my time. And because sitting around just makes you depressed. So now I've put my focus into let's go out and help other people. I can stay in shape going to the gym. I'm almost 50 years old. I don't need to be big and, bodybuilder anymore. Let's go out and help people.
Yeah. Would you say there's a little bit of OCD in that level of trying to build weight, obsessive compulsive disorder? Is it
Yeah.
because it seems like it's an OCD kind of pursuit in that, oh my gosh, that muscle is not popping the way it needs to, that one that no
Oh,
one else
Yeah.
yeah.
has ever
Oh,
seen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brittany, it was he
Yeah.
I'm all,
saying, look at my back, tell me what it looks like all the time?
Yes. Take a picture of my back. Let me see. And I'm like, it looks good.
yeah. Even
Wow.
when it looked good, I could find issues with it. So, yeah, it's definitely OCD a part of it.
So that I and then the transition I can imagine is very different. You were focusing on nothing but your body, the gym. You were a gym junkie, basically.
Yeah.
And what are you focusing on now? Where are your thoughts now? Who are they on now?
Well, I work in technology. I'm focusing now on growing my knowledge in technology again because it's a never-ending learning thing you have to do in technology. I'm focusing on helping my company. I'm at a director level. I can be a president, vice president one day. I have the wits about me. Um, and now I'm focusing my time on I want to help people. I want to put the news, the message. Not only do I want to help people that are thinking about or doing steroids, the dangers. I want to help people, coaching them, mentoring them in real life. There are a lot of kids out here that have went through what I went through, not having parents, having a deceased parent, living on the streets, being poverty stricken. Well, I come from all of that. I've seen nothing but violence, drugs, sexual abuse, things like that as a kid. And there's got to be kids out there that I can reach and help get through that. There's adults that's been through that are hooked on drugs, that are they're doing having substance abuse issues that need somebody like me to mentor them and coach them along. And that's where my passion's there. I want to help these people.
Mm. Seems like you're a good guy, generally speaking, and I haven't known you for much, so like it just seems that way. So I'm very comfortable saying it. Brittany seems like an amazing, supportive person as well. 6 kids. It says a lot about you guys. I can't.
Yeah.
I could barely deal with 2 kids when I was a dad, let alone 6. So my hat goes off to you guys for that. That's an amazing accomplishment. Um, and one of the things that I'm very conscious of is the example that I'm setting for my kids because they're boys. They were teenagers when I was going through my illness, like the real serious part of it. And I kind of felt like, how do I want the example to be about how I'm going to go through the recovery? And, because I could go through it really badly. I could be really annoying and terrible and make it all about me and, you know, not take other people into consideration. And of course, I'm not, when I had a stroke, it's not just me that has it. Everyone goes through it. The whole family, extended family, etc. When you were going to the gym and doing the weights, if your kids had come to you and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to the gym and start shooting up steroids," would that have been okay with you? Would you have, yeah,
No.
Brittany,
No.
I know, Brittany immediately, I didn't
Yeah.
even finish the sentence, and Jonathan, though, as well. But that's the thing about it is that the dysmorphia part of it sort of stops you from seeing that thing that you wouldn't let your kids do. That's not okay for them. It was still okay for you.
Yeah, I mean, I knew the dangers of steroids, but I kept doing them because of my own issues. Now, for my children, they did. They went to the gym with me. They worked out with me. They always asked to go with me, and I took them. But there was never any speaking of steroid use or supplement use.
Yeah.
They'd see me make my morning shake, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And did they learn later that this is the reason why I ended up in hospital? Have they learned that yet?
No, they don't know anything about steroids, and I'm going to try to keep it from them as long as I can. One day when they can understand, I'll let them know, but that is a long time from now. I just let them know I had a stroke, and I'm still training and still working hard. Now I get excited about my milestones, and when I make accomplishments, I'll let them know about that. And my little boys, 9 years old, they come up to me and say, "Ain't no stroke going to keep you down." So that's great. That's a feel good moment.
Yeah. What happens if they stumble on this podcast interview and for some reason your teenage kids, which they probably never will, but decide to actually listen to it and go
Well,
beginning to end?
my girls, my girls are the only ones as teenagers now, and I'll let them know really quick that do steroids if you want, but you'll be looking like a guy.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if they come across this interview and hear what their dad did.
Oh,
Doing.
yeah.
Mm.
To be honest with you, they'd probably be a little upset with me that I put myself in that kind of danger. But, we're a tight family. Like I said, it's me and her and the kids. That's all we got. We have no other family. And we're tight knit. So they realize that, hey, we might make mistakes, but we're going to move forward. We're going to move forward.
Yeah. Everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
The thing about mistakes sometimes is, they end real badly when there was no intention to.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing about steroids. I know there's a lot of stories about people who have really made themselves unwell or not made it through some kind of a medical complication as a result of that.
Yeah.
And it's such a good thing to have you here to share that story, to learn your lesson, to look at new ways to, I suppose, give energy to that part of you that needs to give energy. So it sounds like you've got an excessive amount of energy. And if you just focus on the wrong thing, it might go there. But if you focus on the right thing and it goes there, then amazing things can happen,
Yeah.
like have already happened, right? Some of those amazing things include your wife, your family, your kids. Clearly, a lot of that energy at the right time was put in the direction of something amazing. And the proof is in the pudding. The outcome is great. And then that you stray off a little bit and you don't realize that you've strayed off and you've just gone down that little direction that you thought that's not a big deal. You're going to start down there. But you know that, taking a 1 degree shift off course at the beginning of the journey doesn't seem so bad. But 10 years down the track, that 1 degree, has gone so far off course, you've got no idea how you even got there.
Yeah, Bill, I'm one of those people. My personality is if I'm going to do it, I'm all in. So if I'm going to do something, I'm all in and passionate about it. So I was that way about steroids at one time. Now that I know that I will never do it again, I'm the opposite. I'm completely passionate about not doing it, making sure that I stay clean and do it natural.
I like the sound of that. And that probably ends up becoming passionate about advocacy, about being against steroids and not doing steroids and training naturally, because you can influence a lot of people going into that potential path before they get there, or even if they've just entered, you could potentially help get them out because the underlying reason that it's happening for a lot of people. It could be body dysmorphia. Do you think that's a big thing in the gym? Is body dysmorphia a huge thing in the gym that people aren't speaking about?
Yes, I think it's huge. I think a lot of people have body dysmorphia. They don't talk about it. But here in the past 10 years or so, I call it an epidemic of steroid use because you got kids now 16, 17, 18, that young doing steroids, not because they're fat, not because they're underweight or don't have the potential. Actually, at that age, they have the highest potential. Their testosterone levels are so high at that age that they could build that muscle without drugs, but they want it all and they want it now. And there is an epidemic going on of using, I call it PEDs, performance enhancing drugs, and they're using everything out here now, everything. And it's given them a lot of danger. Not only did I have a stroke and have those health complications from using steroids, it also made my heart thick, the lining of my heart thick. I had heart problems at first, and I had to take medication to get my heart back right at a normal level. And they said that it would be congestive heart failure if I didn't stop. And they said they're glad I stopped. They give me medication. Now, my heart is strengthened back and came back, and it's doing well now. But steroids not only have dangers with blood pressure and brain and artery, you have serious, serious complications with your heart.
And you really don't know what you're injecting into yourself, so who you're getting it from. You can't trust people, companies. You could be just injecting poison into yourself.
Yep, very true.
Yeah. And these kids, if they're starting off that young, they're interfering with their reproduction. They must be interfering with all sorts of things.
Yes, by doing testosterone. And see, when you're doing steroids, testosterone is always the base. You have to have a test because most of the steroids, the regular ones, suppress your testosterone. So when you start doing testosterone, guess what it does? It cuts off your ability to make your own natural testosterone. So no more babies. You can't make babies anymore. You're shooting. They call it shooting blanks. And you can't make. And then even if you come off of the testosterone, it is extremely difficult to ever produce on your own anymore. So you might not ever be able to have kids. You might shut your testosterone forever. And if you take too much testosterone, it can have an adverse effect. It can cause gynecomastia, which is guys form breast tissue. And also it can make you retain a lot of water, which can drive your blood pressure up. It can do a lot of things. So steroids are just, they have a lot of complications. And most of these kids out here now are taking them and don't even know what they're doing to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, I'm glad you reached out and told me your story. I'll be happy to share it and let people know the risks, and then I hope that hopefully that becomes that sort of foundation for you to take this to the next level and spread the message more in whatever way that you choose to do so. As we're coming to the end of the episode, I want to ask you 3 questions that I ask stroke survivors. Brittany can answer these as well, because I'll ask them and she can answer from the perspective of a caregiver. But for you first, Jonathan, what's the hardest thing about stroke so far?
So far, the hardest thing has been the depression and the anxiety and wondering, what am I going to do next?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to survive this? Is it going to happen again?
Yeah. And Brittany, what about you? What has been the hardest thing for you to go through while your husband was unwell?
I would say just the unknown at first, and then having to like suppress my own anxiety to like do the things to help with his anxiety and depression. So
Yeah. So you got to kind of put yourself on pause for right now, stay in the holding pattern, get him over the line, and then get back to yourself, I imagine, at some stage, and sort of start supporting yourself again. Yeah. So this is a big question for you, Jonathan, because it seems like you've already spoken about these things, but what have you learned about your stroke? Or not about your stroke, what has stroke taught you?
Yeah, it's taught me, one, why I had the stroke and why did I do those things to begin with. I was a normal, healthy male, beautiful family. Why did I do those things? So it's taught me to look for other ways to, I don't know, do things with my time, to care more about myself, put my family above myself, my body dysmorphia. And I've learned a lot of scientific information on what a stroke was, how it happens, the different kinds, and ways to keep myself healthier, what to prevent stroke. And that's one of the key things I've learned.
Yeah. What has this time taught you, Brittany?
Oh, a lot of things. But also having more empathy for, you just never know what somebody's going through. I mean, you really don't. You can look totally normal and they could be going through a worse situation. You just never know.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting thing about people who have strokes with deficits that aren't visible. For example, if their hand is not injured or their leg is not injured if they're walking, they have what they call invisible deficits, right? And that's me.
Yeah.
And my left side hurts and it feels different. My balance is, but you see me in the street, you wouldn't have a clue. And it's really hard trying to convince somebody you're having a really bad day when you look great. And it's like,
yeah,
the words don't match the appearance, and it's like, oh my god, this is so hard to convince anybody of anything. But I appreciate what you're saying. So this is also an interesting question. You could probably talk on this for an hour, which you already have, but I'm going to ask it again anyway. There are other stroke survivors and other people that are listening to this podcast, and they're trying to get a tip or some advice or some wisdom or whatever they're trying to gain from it, right? What do you, Jonathan, want to tell those stroke survivors about their journey, and perhaps some other people who may be listening because they're in the gym and they found out about you and now they're listening to this podcast? What's the
Yeah.
message for the stroke survivors, and what's the message for people who are not stroke survivors?
Really, 4 different words: resiliency, perseverance, strength, and family. You got to be resilient. You can't stop. You got to go. You got to grind. You got to keep working as hard as you can and not stop. It's all about repetition and staying with it and keep working hard. Perseverance, knowing in your heart that you're going to persevere and make it through this. You're going to do whatever it takes and you're going to get through it. Strength, the strength to get up every day, to face the world with your limitations, with your injuries, anything that's going on, knowing that you can do it and you're going to make it past it, and being strong. Don't lay down for anybody. Just keep moving forward. And then family. Look for your family. Look for the people that love you the most to support you. Stay around them. They're going to help you get through the rough moments, the anxiety, the depression, things like that. I had my family. This is the only family I got. And if it weren't for her, I don't know if I could have made it through. So family is so important. That's what I would tell each and every survivor out there.
Mm-hmm. Before I ask Brittany, something came up while you were saying that. That's awesome what you've said, those 4 words. Was steroids a short route to something that you could have done that was harder to do? Do you know how you kind of mentioned, yeah, um, you put the hard work in, etc. Were you trying to take a short path to that, or were you also
Yeah.
doing the hard work and then trying to just take another path? What was that like?
Well, again, doing steroids, it helps you get there quicker, but you still got to put in the hard work. You
Okay.
still got to lift heavy and all those things. But yes, definitely trying to get there quicker. I didn't start till I was 40 plus years old. And I was like, well, I'm behind as it is. So let me get a little help to move ahead faster.
Okay. So that was part of the motivator. Okay.
Yeah.
And Brittany, from a caregiver's perspective, a wife's perspective, what I don't know, what would you like to kind of leave for people to consider after what you've been through?
Never give up. There's always a better day ahead. Don't take the hard road. Don't take the quick and easy fix.
As a caregiver,
Yeah.
what would you tell other caregivers? Yeah, how should they be? How should they treat the situation? Because Bill, a lot of times I see people in stroke groups where their caregiver laughs at them or makes fun of them or doesn't quite, the invisible injuries like you were talking about, they don't quite see them. So they're like, oh, you're not in pain. Get up. You look fine. Well, you know, you got to have somebody really understanding and loving to help you through those times.
Well, that's just sad because I don't know who would say those things to their loved ones or even a stranger, but yeah.
Ignorant people are often not willingly ignorant, just people like I was before stroke, just ignorant of other people's experiences because I was too wrapped up in my own experience. And then I spent some time in a wheelchair and I realized, oh, people in a wheelchair aren't just sitting down. There's a lot more going on. And I had no idea. And then when I found myself in one and had all the limitations of somebody who's in a wheelchair, it was like, oh man, I was an idiot. I had no idea what I was doing. So that's the kind of people that do it, people that are just don't know any better. It's great that you're more aware and you're more empathetic. It's probably a female thing as well. females tend to be a little more empathetic, I feel. At least that's my experience from the research that I've done with all the dumb mates and blokes that I know. But it's been lovely to chat to you guys. Thank you so much for reaching out and sharing the story. I really appreciate it. I wish you well in your health, your recovery, and Brittany, I wish you some time so that you can start looking after the things that you need to get back onto looking after, so you guys can be healthy and well for your children, because there's no point everybody. This is one of the things that I try to sort of impart on a family who's going through this is, sometimes the relatives and the family, they kind of all suffer their own version of deterioration or breakdown after a caregiver, because they're a caregiver after their loved one has a stroke. We can't have 3, 5, 6 people in the family sick at the same time. Let's look after ourselves so that we can be able to be well to support that person who's going through that, but also to not make things even more complicated and even harder. That's kind of how I see it. Caregivers forget to take care of themselves. They put everything that's about self-care on hold, and then they just put it all into other people. And that's what I wish for you. You're probably already doing it, but I wish for you that you have some time for yourself.
We're equal.
Yeah.
We take care of each other regardless. So
Yeah, even with my stroke, I'm always looking after her, making sure she's okay, because I've been the sole provider for this family for a long time, and I've been the protector, the person that's there. And even when I was in a wheelchair, I mean, hard to give that up. When you provide and you take care of your family, I don't care if I'm in a wheelchair, I'm going to do something. I'm going to get up.
Yeah. I get it. I get it. I really appreciate you both. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yep. Thank you, Bill.
That brings us to the end of this episode with Jonathan and Brittany. Jonathan's journey of recovery after a stroke and Brittany's unwavering support as his wife and caregiver remind us of the power of resilience, love, and determination in the face of life-altering challenges. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Please like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, a 5-star rating or review would mean so much. It helps others discover the podcast and join our supportive community. Remember to check out my book, The Unexpected Way That a Stroke Became the Best Thing That Happened. Some readers have called it a must-read and shared how it has helped them stay positive through their recovery. It's available on Amazon or at recoveryafterstroke.com/book. And if you'd like to support the podcast directly, visit patreon.com/recoveryafterstroke. Thank you for being here and making this podcast a part of your recovery journey. I'll see you in the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy quality, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.